In today's video, we're talking about how you can create a villainous manga, comic, or light novel. So what is a villainous isekai manga, comic, or light novel? Well, this is a genre that has gained popularity in recent years. It is when the main character goes into an isekai world where they suddenly become the villainous. You have likely seen many titles that are based on this theme, and usually these topics will also be in the isekai genre. So today we're going to be talking about how you can create your own series in this genre. First of all, we need to discuss the most important character, the main character, who is the villainess. Now, in most cases in Villainess Isekai series, the villainous character will usually be in an actual video game world. Usually, the main character will be playing a game or be a fan of a game and then suddenly find themselves in the role of the villainess. However, it does not always have to be this way, and we'll be talking more about this later on this video. But first of all, let's talk about the main character and her personality. Typically, the main character has a good reason for being the villainess in the story. Maybe it is because of some part of her backstory. Maybe she had to become the villainess as a sort of way to survive in the harshness of her world. Or maybe this main character is someone who started off as mean or cruel in the story, but once your character becomes the villainess, they learn to try and become a bit of a different character. Or maybe as the villainess in the original story, in the game world or the story where this character is in, maybe this character was someone who made some bad or difficult choices, but then when the main character comes into that role, they are able to make different choices and essentially save the day, becoming more of the hero of the story. When we're talking about the main villainous character, we also need to talk about her design. Now, this design will obviously match the original villainous character of the story or game that the character is from. Usually this villainous design will match a lot of common tropes. They will usually have a sinister smile or glare, and wear a unique dress that really sets them apart from the other characters in the story. In the design as well, usually they will incorporate something from their real world, their main world, into their design. So once they become this character, they are still inspired by a small part of their original life in the real world. The design of the villainous character will usually show their rank in the new world. So usually they will have very pretty flowing hair and they will have very elegant dress design. When designing the villainous character, I recommend using the colour wheel and choosing colours that really complement each other, and also understanding colour meanings and using those colour meanings to your advantage in the character's design. When creating the villainous character, it's also really important to consider their motivation. What motivates them to achieve their goals? When you are creating this character, you want to ensure that you very quickly give them a goal that they will focus on throughout the book, and then talk about what drives them. And usually what drives this motivation will be something that fits into their role as the villainous character. Usually this goal will be driven by a need to seek revenge, a sense of betrayal, or means of gaining power in this new world that they find themselves in. But it's important to keep in mind that a villainous character is someone who is a very driven character. They are not someone who will sit on the sidelines and wait for other characters to do it. And that is why this genre in particular and this character type has become so successful and popular. It's because people like the fact that the villainous characters are someone who are very driven and determined to reach their goals. So now let's talk about the isekai element, because the villainous genre is almost always combined with the isekai genre. So we will be talking about these together specifically in this video. So when we're talking about isekai, we're talking about how does your character get into the other world. Now, the most common way this occurs is that the character is reincarnated into the isekai world. Usually something will happen in the real world and they will suddenly wake up in the isekai world, either as the villainess or they will become a baby in the new world and then grow up and become this villainous character type. So either way, they are somehow reincarnated into this role of being the villainous character. Now, the villainous character can be transported in other ways. Sometimes the villainous character might be simply playing a game they enjoy and find themselves in the world, or they could be reading a book and find themselves in the world of the book. In this method, it's more of a portal transformation where your character suddenly goes through a portal and finds themselves within the isekai world. However, in Villainess series, usually this isekai transport is a one-time method, and usually the character will not be determined to find their way back, but this is up to you as the creator of this story, whether or not the character wants to return to their main world or not. But usually once the character is in the role of the villainess, this is the role that they will continue in throughout the rest of the story. Usually when the character finds themselves in the new world as the villainess, usually they will keep their awareness about what happened to this character originally. Now usually if this character is a video game character or someone from a book, they will know what happened to the villainess originally and use this awareness to change their fate in the current moments of their story. Now that they are in the role of the villainess, they can make better decisions and change their own fate. Usually, in order to do this, they will try and change the course of actions that the villainess took in the original timeline, either by changing the way they talk to other people, making better decisions, or being the villainess/heroine that they need to be in the story. So now let's talk a bit more about the setting and world building, because once your character finds themselves in a new world, this world and the setting is something really important to consider. So when you are developing and building this setting, this is an entirely new world that your character is discovering alongside your audience. And this means that this new world should be something that is really well developed and intriguing. Your character is essentially going on the adventure along with your readers. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to go with what is common for the genre, but of course you can choose to branch outside of this as well. Commonly, a isekai villainess series will be focused on a fantasy world. So usually this fantasy world will be sort of medieval inspired and may also include magic or fantasy themes. There will usually be common elements such as there being kingdoms and nobles and use of magic and magical creatures within this world. I recommend to help it stand out more from other villainess series, try to think about what unique characters and creatures you can add to this world to make it more unique. Think about then how your villainous character's role fits into this world and how her decisions impact the rest of this isekai world as a whole. Another common theme in the villainous isekai world building is that there'll usually be certain social hierarchies, and this is why your character being a villainess becomes more important, because they are put into a role of a character that they are unfamiliar with, and usually this character will be someone who is well known by the other characters. The villainess's actions in their previous story will have affected many characters' lives, and so there will likely be many characters that either hate them or envy them in some way. And so now this villainess is put into a situation where there is an already existing social hierarchy. There are already a bunch of different important characters that your character needs to speak to, and so this may feel really overwhelming for your character at first. But this also depends on what kind of structure you want to set up in your world, and I recommend doing the world building first before you bring your villainous character in to make it a lot easier to write. So when talking about the setting and the world building in a villainous isekai series, we want to really consider the original world that the character is being put into. Now typically if this is a video game, the world itself will have a lot of video game elements included within it. But there are different types of video games that your character might find themselves in. It could be a strategy RPG game, it could be a board game, it could be an otome game. Or this world could be the world of a book, and so there might be similar elements from a book. And so these are also important to consider when you are building the world building, because if it is like a game, then you should also include some game-like elements within your world. So your villainess has now found themselves into this new world, and they are now put into the role of the villainess. Now that your character is in this world, what do they do? How does your character proceed from here? Well, this is where we need to talk about the characteristics of a good villainous character. As mentioned before, usually the villainous character will be put into a role of a character who sort of had a wrong end, where the previous villainous character made poor decisions, or they were betrayed in the story. And so now the villainess in this character's role decides to make better decisions and change her own fate. Usually in this as well, it comes with an important redemption arc for your character. Now your character is able to take a look at their previous actions, or the previous actions of the character, and decide to make better choices. So in this, they determine that they need to make specific choices in order to be a good villainous character. Usually this might mean that she becomes the hero of her story, or it means that she embraces her villainous nature, but is different in the way of the original villainous character they were presented as. Usually the villainous character will be someone who learns how to read other characters really well and uses this discernment in order to make better decisions. They are someone who is able to make good plans and strategies far in advance, and so this strategy is a part of this genre. When the character is making their plans, they make them well in advance and consider all elements of the story using their knowledge of the original book or game or any other knowledge they took from their real world into this new isekai world. However, when creating the villainous character, you don't want them to be all-powerful, and they should also have flaws that make them feel realistic and believable. Now being placed in this new world as the villainous character, they might feel like there is a great distance between them and the others, and especially other characters who have felt like they were betrayed by the villainous character in the past. The character who has now become the villainess may feel like it is hard to become closer to the other characters around them and feel that there is no one who will ever truly understand them. But this is where you need to bring in supporting characters who will learn to understand the villainous character. Now usually in a villainous isekai series, there will be a few character types that will be important to the story. First of all, you will typically have a love interest character. Now I have seen this done in a few different ways, and this really depends on you and the type of story you want to create. Either the villainess will fall in love with the original hero of the story, or the villainess may fall in love with another villainous type of character. Or there might be another supporting character that your character cares for. For your particular story, you may even choose to have your villainess work alone and not have any love interest characters, and that's perfectly okay too. Typically the most important part when writing a villainous isekai series is the balance between the villainous and the heroic characters. Usually, there will be a dynamic which shows the contrast between the characters by having the villainous character and the original hero of the story. However, the villainess and the hero don't always have to be enemies, and they could become unexpected allies later on in the story as well. As time goes on in your character's story, they will usually meet other side characters and make friends who truly understand them. But these people could be childhood friends within the story, they could be magical characters, or they could be other unexpected characters that your villainess meets along the way. When it comes to creating the characters in a villainous isekai series, there is really many potential characters you could choose to have, and this all depends on what kind of world you are choosing to create. For example, if you were creating an otome game, then obviously you would have more male love interest characters, whereas if you were creating a world more centered around an RPG game, maybe the villainess would be someone who works alone, but has more allies who can help her strategize. So this all comes down to what kind of world you're creating and what would make sense for your story. So let's talk a bit more about plot dynamics within villainous isekai series. A very common theme in a lot of villainous isekai series is that the character is working against their fate. They will typically know what happened to the villainess in the original story and be determined to change this fate no matter what happens. But usually they'll be presented with events that make them wonder whether everything is set in stone or if they can really change things. This dynamic creates a lot of internal and external conflict, where the character is constantly faced with difficult challenges not only outside of herself, but also internal conflicts as well, where she's questioning her own judgment or decisions. After all, it can be quite stressful knowing the original way the story went and trying to find the best way to change the outcome. Usually in this as well, they make unexpected allies or find romance, and this can really help them to grow as a character and understand what choices they need to make next as this villainous character type. And usually these unexpected allies, friends, or romances are there to help the villainous character to survive whatever original fate the original villainess had in the story. Usually a villainous story will be presented with a number of significant themes, and these themes will be there to support the character's growth throughout the story and also to create an intriguing story from beginning to end. In most cases, these themes will be about the redemption of the character, how the character learns from the past mistakes of the original character in this game world or story, and how they learn to become a better person and become the hero of their story. Usually through this type of character arc, they will feel guilty for the past character's actions, even though it wasn't them, and find ways to make things right. There are also lots of themes about self-discovery and learning more about themselves. Usually the character starts off as someone who feels like they have been betrayed by everyone, and so this betrayal leads them to focus more on themselves, and this leads to them becoming a much stronger character throughout their character arc. The villainous character comes to find that they are not simply someone who is playing a game, they are someone who can make their own choices and decisions. So as the villainess goes through their story, do they become someone who goes with the original plot, or do they become someone who chooses to stand out and make decisions that ultimately shift the world and their own character arc? Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what kind of Villainess Isekai series you're creating, because I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure others would love to hear your thoughts too. Visit my website, midnightcross.com, for resources, templates, and workbooks that can help you to level up your story. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!